Police had the Zodiac Killer's fingerprints, his handwriting, his DNA, his voice on tape. They had bloody prints lifted from a taxicab, 30 latent fingerprints developed from his letters, a partial DNA profile extracted from saliva on stamps he'd licked, handwriting samples from dozens of communications. They compared these to over 2,500 suspects. Hundreds of men were cleared because the evidence didn't match. Arthur Lee Allen, the only man ever publicly named, was dismissed because his fingerprints didn't match. His handwriting didn't match. His DNA didn't match. And they still couldn't catch him. This isn't a story about a brilliant criminal. It's a story about how we failed. The invisible victim count. The Zodiac Killer officially killed 5 people. He claimed 37. But if you count everyone whose life was destroyed by his letters, his threats, his game, the real number is closer to 800,000. Let me explain. It's October 1969. The Zodiac has just murdered a San Francisco cab driver named Paul Stein, shot him point blank in the head, tore a piece of his bloody shirt, and mailed it to the San Francisco Chronicle. And then he writes something that changes everything. Quote, "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." Unquote. Within 48 hours, the entire Bay Area shuts down. 65 school buses across 28 schools in Napa County are given armed police escorts. Helicopters circle overhead. Single-engine planes trail buses from above. Parents pull their children out of school entirely. Gun sales spike. Curfews are imposed across multiple counties. An estimated 800,000 people, parents, children, teachers, neighbors, live in terror, not because the Zodiac is actively hunting them, but because he said he might. This is psychological warfare, and the Zodiac knows exactly what he's doing. Because he's not just killing people, he's killing their sense of safety, their ability to trust, their belief that tomorrow will come. The incident, when evidence means nothing. Let me take you back to where it all began. December 20th, 1968, Lake Herman Road, just outside Vallejo, California. Betty Lou Jensen, 16. David Faraday, 17. First date. She's wearing a purple dress. He's fumbling with the radio, trying to find the right station. You can almost hear the static between songs. At 11 p.m., another car pulls up behind them. 5 shots. A .22 caliber semi-automatic. Betty runs 28 feet before she collapses. David is shot in the head at point-blank range. The police think it's random, a robbery, a jealous ex. They have no idea this is just the prologue. 7 months later, July 4th, 1969, Blue Rock Springs Park. Another lover's lane. Darlene Varin, 22. Mike McGay, 19. They're sitting in Darlene's Corvair when a car pulls up beside them. The driver gets out, walks towards them, and without a single word, opens fire. 9 shots. Darlene is killed instantly. Mike survives, barely. But here's where it gets interesting. Less than an hour after the shooting, the Vallejo Police Department receives a phone call. A man's voice, calm, robotic. He says, "I want to report a double murder. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The police trace the call to a payphone, but by the time they arrive, he's already gone. And Mike McGay, the man who saw the killer's face without a mask, won't speak to police for 22 years. But there's something Mike saw that night that he didn't tell them until 40 years later. In 1991, surviving victim Mike McGough was finally shown a photo lineup. 6 pictures, 6 potential suspects. He didn't hesitate. He pointed to Arthur Lee Allen. "It's him," McGough said. "Last time I saw this face was July 4, 1969. I'm very sure that's the man who shot me." The detective asked him to rate his certainty on a scale of 1 to 10. "At least an 8, Magot replied. So why didn't they arrest Allen? Because his fingerprints didn't match? His handwriting didn't match? His DNA didn't match? The forensic evidence cleared the man the survivor identified. Everyone focuses on the ciphers, the letters, the symbol. But there's one piece of evidence from the Zodiac case that investigators tried to bury. And once you hear it, you'll understand why they wanted it to stay hidden. October 11th, 1969, Presidio Heights, San Francisco. Paul Stine, a 29-year-old cab driver and doctoral student, picks up a passenger near the theater district. The destination, Washington and Maple. But the cab stops 1 block further, at Washington and Cherry. 1 gunshot, point blank, to the head. Paul Stine dies instantly. 3 teenagers in the apartment building directly across the street watch the entire thing unfold. They see the killer exit the cab. They watch him tear away a large piece of Paul Stine's shirt. They see him methodically wipe down the vehicle. And they call the police. When officers arrive at the scene, they find something extraordinary. Bloody fingerprints. Multiple prints. On the post between the driver's side front and rear doors. On the door handle. Prints that, according to an SFPD memo, show traces of blood and are believed to be prints of the suspect. This is the smoking gun. Physical evidence that could identify the killer. So what happened? Nothing. For decades, law enforcement maintained absolute faith in those prints. They compared them to hundreds, possibly thousands, of suspects. Arthur Lee Allen? No match. Earl Van Best Jr.? No match. Richard Gaikowski? No match. But here's what investigators didn't want you to know. In recent years, some investigators have begun to express doubt about whether those bloody prints actually belong to the Zodiac at all. One witness's family member claims the prints may have been left by someone who tried to help Paul Stine after he was shot, meaning the single most important piece of physical evidence in the entire case might not be evidence at all. And then there's the DNA. In 2002, San Francisco police extracted a partial DNA profile from saliva on stamps and envelopes used in the Zodiac's letters. It was hailed as a breakthrough, the magic bullet that would finally solve the case. But here's the problem with partial DNA profiles. They can only rule someone out. They can't definitively identify someone. The DNA didn't match Arthur Lee Allen. It didn't match any known suspect. And then, years later, investigators discovered something troubling. The DNA was collected from the outside of the stamp, not the back where the killer would have licked it, meaning it could have come from anyone who handled the envelope. A postal worker, a newspaper editor, anyone. The evidence that was supposed to solve the case may have been contaminated from the start. So let's talk about what actually happened the night Paul Stine was murdered, because this is where the Zodiac came closest to being caught. The 3 teenagers who witnessed the crime called 911. They gave a detailed description of the killer. White male, early to mid-40s, stocky build, crew cut, glasses, brown jacket. Police dispatchers made a critical error. They broadcast the suspect as a Negro male adult. Two patrol officers, Don Folk and Eric Zelms, were driving through Presidio Heights when they saw a white man walking away from the crime scene. The man was calm, walking with purpose. He fit the teenager's description perfectly. The officers stopped him, asked him if he'd seen anything suspicious, and the man said, "Yes, there was a man running by waving a gun." He pointed the officers in the wrong direction. They drove off, and he disappeared into the night. 2 weeks later, the Zodiac sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle. In it, he wrote, "Two cops pulled a goof about 3 minutes after I left the cab. I was walking down the hill to the park when this cop car pulled up, and one of them called me over and asked if I saw anyone acting suspicious. I said yes. There was a man running by waving a gun, and the cops peeled rubber and went around the corner as I directed them, and I disappeared into the park, a block and a half away, never to be seen again." Officers Falk and Zelms realized what had happened. They had spoken to the Zodiac, face to face, and let him walk away. By 1974, the letters stop. The Zodiac vanishes. No explanation, no final taunt. Just silence. Over the decades, investigators pursue every lead. DNA, fingerprints, handwriting analysis. In 2020, a team of amateur codebreakers finally solves the Zodiac's infamous 340-character cipher after 51 years. It reads, "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." So what do we take from this? We had the evidence, the fingerprints, the DNA, the handwriting, the voice recording. We had eyewitnesses. We had survivors who identified suspects. We had over 2,500 potential leads investigated by multiple law enforcement agencies over 5 decades. And we failed. Not because the Zodiac was a genius, not because he was impossibly careful, but because the evidence we relied on wasn't as reliable as we thought. Fingerprints that may not have been his, DNA that may have been contaminated, witnesses who misidentified the suspect's race, survivors whose testimony conflicted with forensic evidence. The Zodiac Killer didn't outsmart us. We outsmarted ourselves. The official victim count is 5, but the real number? It's every parent who pulled their child out of school, every teacher who rode those buses with armed guards, every couple who stopped going to lovers' lanes, every person who looked at a stranger and wondered, is it him? 800,000 people lived in the Bay Area during the height of the Zodiac's reign, and for years, they all lived in fear. That's the real body count, not 5, not 37, but hundreds of thousands of people whose lives were fundamentally changed by a man whose face we may never know. We like to believe that justice always wins, that forensic science is infallible, that monsters always get caught. But sometimes, the monster wins because we fail. And that's more terrifying than any cipher could ever be. Because somewhere out there, maybe in a quiet suburb, maybe in a nursing home, maybe buried in an unmarked grave, is a man who beat the system, not with brilliance, but with our own mistakes. Because sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we never see coming.